This graph compares all the house crashes since 1973, measuring from the peak of how prices fell and then began to recover. Most crashes start exactly the same. When the peaks are all aligned up together, the immediate crashes are exactly the same, and the black line is where we are right now. The problem is, beyond this point, my guess is as good as anybody else's. Each crash has its own unique length and depth in terms of the crash, how far prices went down, and for how long. Therefore, it really is hard to predict what's going to happen, but at least the period right now, I would call the period of certainty. We know for the immediate, prices are still going to go down and follow the trend of previous crashes until it then starts to either level off and remain flat or go down even further. That means it makes it a little bit easier to plan, at least for the next few months ahead. But after that point, it's every man for themselves. It really is a game of the unknown, trying to work out whether prices will keep on going down further or whether they'll remain relatively flat and then we're at the bottom of the dip rather than a massive crash. The problem this causes is that it creates extra stress and makes it more difficult to plan your next move, whether you're remortgaging, moving, or if you're a first-time buyer. But with great volatility and fear, also introduces opportunity and benefits. I'm going to go classic finfluencer on you here and give you a Warren Buffett quote, but it's one that I absolutely love and I think is very true right now. Warren Buffett is one of the most wealthiest investors in the entire world, and his famous saying is to be fearful when others are greedy and be greedy when others are fearful. My take on this is that when prices are going really, really high, back away from the crazy market and just take a breath. Likewise, when people are fearful, it means that it's a good time to get in now and find yourself a good discount on what could be your very first home. Ultimately, what will a crash look like? The reality is nobody truly knows. Even the CEO of Lloyds Bank and Lloyds Banking Group have said that they expect property prices to go down about 10% this year, but I have no idea how they work this out or predict it. It really is sticking your finger in the air, trying to work out which way the wind is going. This is the Savills house price weather forecast. Yep, in true British fashion, the house price report from Savills is in the form of a weather forecast. They predict that the UK is also going to go down about 10%, with dark clouds and stormy rain this year. Next year, with grey clouds and marginal growth in 2024, before we start seeing some sunny gains again in about 3 years' time. So both Halifax, one of the UK's biggest lenders, and Savills, one of the UK's biggest estate agents, are both very aligned on what they think is going to happen to the property market this year. And this graph from Built Place shows from today and the slight dip we've already had what scenarios look like if houses went down 5, 10, 20 and 30%. If the thought of the house price crash does worry you, then maybe this will help you a little bit. If prices went down double what both Halifax and Savills think here on this graph, then it only really sets prices back just to about pre-pandemic levels. 20% is quite a big drop to lose just 2 years of progress. If we lost 30% off of our house prices, then we'd be going backwards to about 2015, which is a bit more substantial, losing 7 years of house price progress. And when you look at the forecasted 10% drop, that would basically mean we're going back to the future, to the middle of 2021. Not bad. Effectively, this means that you've got a chance to go back in time and potentially get a house at last year's prices if these charts ring reasonably true. In the best case scenario for buyers, you might be able to go back 2 years into the past, meaning if you missed your opportunity now due to affordability with rates coming down and house prices settling as well, it might mean you can jump back into the market at the very last minute. But then at the same time, it's a little bit of a double-edged sword because you don't want to buy too soon if property prices can keep going down a little bit further versus just getting in now if you find a house that you really, really like. But then also when you look back at Savills' weather forecast on the property market, they're saying in 5 years' time, prices are expected to be up anywhere between 8 and 11%. So actually for the long term, and 5 years is a good amount of time to be in a property for as a minimum, everyone's going to be up anyway. Apart from London, you need to be on the naughty step for a little bit longer until you see some positive house price growth. But first, a massive thanks to this week's sponsor, Plum. Plum is a simple, smart money app that links your bank account to make saving money effortless. It's powered by AI and helps improve your relationship with money by setting aside regular amounts for you automatically. Whether you're saving for a holiday, house, rainy day fund, or investing, the automated rules set money aside without you even noticing, making it easy to build healthy savings habits. And it does all this while making sure you're not left short of cash. You can put your money into an easy access savings account and get up to 2.7% AER at the time of filming. Plum has 1.9 1.5 million customers across Europe, and interest pockets are FSCS protected up to £85,000, so your money is safe. Check out the link in the description to open your account today and start saving or investing. Going back to 2007, on this graph, the house prices indices from the Office for National Statistics, which is based on land registry data about 6 months behind, and Rightmove, which is based on asking prices, and Nationwide, which is based on mortgages, have shown astronomical growth, especially in the past 2 to 3 years. But now we're starting to see a dip downwards. But it's also a really good period right now where we're starting to go back in time. So if you've just missed the boat and properties have just reached out of your affordability, as things start to go down and mortgages start to settle, this is going to be attempt number 2, and it won't last for long. So where are we right now? But it means, financially speaking, we might be in a position where we were 1 to 2, if not more, years ago, meaning you can reset the clock and go again if that puts you back into affordability. This graph shows the actual prices in the market compared to modelled and expected prices. It links data from the Office for National Statistics and the Bank of England to show, based on all economical factors, what should happen, and then it benchmarks it to look if prices are underpriced or overpriced. There's 2 famous events here in recent history, the late 80s boom and the golden days before the 2008 crash, and it shows how property prices were marked as being massively overpriced, but then dropped massively very quickly. The past few years from 2010 onwards, prices have only ever been slightly above overpriced relative to the modelled expectations. And it's only in the past year or 2 we begin to see this spike where house prices are actually overvalued and overpriced. So if you then start to compare where we are now in 2023 versus 2008 and before then, that surge isn't as big, which might suggest that again here we're not expecting a huge crash because we haven't seen as much of an overpriced surge when you factor in inflation into the economy, which is why houses are still getting very expensive. But the reality is, looking at all of these graphs, it really is impossible to tell you what's going to happen. All we can do is think about logical scenarios and look at the data to compare what's happened before and what's happening now to try and roughly guess where we think we're going to land this time next year. However, looking at where we are today, again back on this graph in the black line, we're at a bit of a fork in the road. It will continue for a little bit further for the next 1 to 2 quarters, but then we are in completely uncharted territory. And as you can see, every crash is completely different. Historically, renting a house has always been more expensive than having a mortgage, minus any cost for things like repairs, maintenance, and all of the other stuff that comes with owning an actual house. On this graph here, in the past 12 months, we've seen for the first time in quite a while that mortgages have become more expensive than renting, with an average rent at £800 and the average 90% loan-to-value mortgage at about £1,100, plus then all the maintenance costs on top of actually owning the property. Interestingly, we haven't seen this shift since 2006 and 2007, right before the 2008 crash. So again here, we're just following the exact same pattern and would mean that it wouldn't be unrealistic to expect mortgages to massively come down over the next few months and into next year. So what is normal at the moment? The problem is the market has been so volatile and there's been so much movement, it's really hard to understand what normal actually is in 2023. This graph here shows for the most part the monthly transactions going through HMRC for stamp duty and mortgage approvals. Everything is relatively stable since the 2008 crash. There was then an upwards trend to about 2015 and then leveled off, so we knew what normal looked like, and that kept house price growth reasonably stable. And then you hit this mess on the right hand side, a huge dip during the COVID market pause, almost like an earthquake seismic graph. There's massive peaks, then huge dips, then back up, and then just at the end, we're starting to now see some kind of stability once again. The problem is HMRC data is about 6 months behind, so we're not seeing the dip yet on the blue line, which might change over time. And all of this ultimately means that because there is no norm right now, it's really hard to say, yes, this is exactly what's going to happen, because we're following a different path compared to 2008 and previous crashes. And we're in completely uncharted territory within the next few months where we just do not know what is going to happen. So let's talk about GDP. Here on this graph, you can see that we've had nice, steady and slow, consistent growth over a long period of time from 2010 upwards to about 2020. This made things really predictable and we knew where things were heading. But then when COVID hit, that meant a huge drop, and we're only today just about recovering GDP-wise from where we were pre-pandemic. But because a recession is expected this year, we might dip a little bit further before we then start to see new GDP highs, maybe in 2024, maybe later. Now, GDP is a measure of economic output, and this can be loosely related to household affordability. The less people are spending, the less money flows through the economy, which suggests that if people can't afford as much, Relative to house prices, it means that people aren't willing to pay the current prices for them. So there is a loose link between GDP and also the house prices in any economy. But then when we talk about a flat housing market, the latest stats at the start of 2023 show an almost flat economy. We grew 0.1%, which is pretty flat, but it's still ever so slightly positive, which again is matching this stagnation or stalling where prices aren't going up in property prices, but nor are they going down. So we're at this really interesting flat line, and it's really difficult to tell where it's going to go next. Is it going to stay flat? Is it going to go down? Or is it just going to increase a little bit? But ultimately, even if things stay flat, at least that's reasonably predictable, and it means that banks can start to plan forwards, and we'll start to see things like inflation settle down and ultimately at interest rates. Ultimately, we're in a very weird time right now. We've had this massive surge of volatility where things have gone up, things have gone down, and it's not been very stable. Whereas now, I feel like we're just getting a bit of time to breathe in the first quarter of this year until we really start to understand the impacts of this property crash or the property dip, whatever it's going to be. It's like this strange period of limbo where we can't quite plan what's going to happen going forward. So right now, it's a matter of understanding the data. If you're looking for a house, start looking at the market right now. There might be some fantastic deals out there where sellers are starting to reduce their prices already. The most important thing right now is keep an eye on the mortgage rates, keep looking at what houses you can afford on the current rates today, and if the right house is there, then go for it. If you enjoyed this video, then check out this one here, which explores the housing bubble in more detail to understand if we're in a bubble right now, will it pop, and how big will that explosion be? So click on here, and I'll see you in the next video.